I've always thought of Max as the kind of guy who could walk into a room and immediately make it feel less serious. He had that grin, the one that said he was either about to make fun of you or about to rope you into something ridiculous. We'd been friends since our first year of college, and even though we'd grown up a lot since then, some things never changed. He was still the guy who showed up at my place unannounced, helped himself to my snacks, and dropped onto my couch like he owned it. That afternoon was no different. I was sitting at my desk, staring blankly at my laptop screen, when I heard the familiar sound of my apartment door opening. Before I could even turn my head, Max was standing there with a sheepish look on his face and something clutched in his hand. "Bro," he said, waving the object like it was a broken toy. "My trimmer just died on me. Completely useless." I leaned back in my chair and raised an eyebrow. "You busted another one already? What are you doing with them? Shaving tree bark?" He laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, man. Just regular maintenance, you know. Chest, arms, a little bit here and there. I can't show up at the gym looking like a grizzly bear. I've got a reputation." "Reputation for what? Complaining about your body hair?" I shot back. He smirked and stepped further into the room, holding up the trimmer like it was evidence in a trial. "All I'm saying is, I like to stay clean. Anyway, can I borrow yours? Just for a few minutes." I pretended to think it over, tapping my chin dramatically. I don't know. My trimmer is a premium model. State of the art. I don't just lend it to anyone." Max rolled his eyes. "Oh, please. You act like it's a Ferrari. It's just a trimmer." "Ah, but you've come to me in your hour of need," I said, pointing at him with mock seriousness. "That means I get to name my price." "And what's that supposed to mean?" he asked, crossing his arms. I shrugged casually. "Maybe I'll shave you myself. Full service, no charge. Better than a barber." For a second, there was silence. Then Max burst out laughing so hard he had to steady himself on the desk. "Yeah, right. Like I'm gonna let you do that. You'd probably carve your initials into my chest hair." I grinned, acting as though I hadn't been joking at all. "Hey, I'm serious. Think about it, it's easier with two hands. I've got steady fingers. Plus, we're both guys. What's the big deal?" He tilted his head, giving me that look he always gave when he was trying to figure out if I was messing with him or not. His grin lingered, but there was a flicker of something else in his eyes. Something I couldn't quite pin down. "You're unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. "Always gotta take it one step further." "Come on, Max," I teased. "What's the worst that could happen? I save you from accidentally shaving a bald spot in the middle of your chest? You'd thank me later." He waved me off, walking toward the bathroom where I kept my trimmer. "I'll just use it myself. No need to get weird." "Suit yourself," I said, spinning my chair back toward the laptop, though I couldn't resist sneaking a glance over my shoulder. "But if you end up with a lopsided hairline, don't blame me." He stopped in the doorway, turning back with a smirk. "You really want to do it, don't you?" I shrugged, keeping my tone light. "Maybe I just don't trust you with good equipment." There was a pause again, the kind of pause where 1,000 unspoken things hover in the air, too fragile to touch but impossible to ignore. Then, to my surprise, Max sighed and leaned against the doorframe. "You know what? Fine. Why not? Let's see what happens." It was my turn to laugh, though inside I felt my chest tighten just a little. "Wait, you're serious?" "Yeah, man. You offered, right? Let's go. Prove you're better at this than me." I stood up slowly, trying to hide the way my pulse had suddenly picked up. I'd meant it as a joke, or at least that's what I told myself. But the truth was, there was always this subtle undercurrent between us. Nothing ever spoken out loud, nothing either of us dared put into words, but moments like these, moments when the air shifted just slightly, made me wonder. "All right," I said, grabbing the trimmer from the shelf. "But don't say I didn't warn you. I take my craft very seriously." Max laughed again, the sound echoing through the small bathroom. "If you mess me up, I'm suing." "Relax," I replied, flicking on the trimmer to test the hum of the blades. "You're in good hands." As I motioned for him to step closer, I couldn't help but notice the shift in my own tone. Still playful, still casual, but carrying an undertone that even I couldn't ignore anymore. It was the sound of something quietly daring, like pushing a boundary that had been waiting years to be crossed. The bathroom suddenly felt a lot smaller with Max in it. It wasn't just the space, it was the way he filled it, standing there with that easy confidence he always carried, even when he was trying to pretend he wasn't self-conscious. He pulled his hoodie over his head in one swift motion, tossing it on the counter, and the playful tone we'd carried into this suddenly shifted. It wasn't like I hadn't seen him shirtless before. Summers at the lake, late-night pickup games, lazy afternoons in college. But this felt different. Maybe it was the way the light bounced off the mirror, catching the edges of his shoulders. Maybe it was the fact that this time it was just the two of us, no crowd, no excuses. I tried to keep my voice steady, flicking the trimmer on and off to check the buzz. "You sure about this? Last chance to back out." He shrugged, running a hand over his chest with mock seriousness. "What, you don't trust your skills?" "It's not my skills I'm worried about," I muttered before I could stop myself. Max glanced at me, eyebrows raised. "Then what?" I shook my head quickly, forcing a laugh. "Nothing. Just don't move too much, all right?" He smirked but didn't press me, stepping closer until he was within arm's reach. The scent of his cologne hit me, faint but sharp, mixing with the warm, clean smell of soap. My throat felt dry. "Where do you want me?" he asked, like it was the most casual question in the world. I swallowed, trying to ignore the way my pulse jumped. "Just stand still. I'll figure it out." He nodded, bracing his arms against the sink behind him. His posture said relaxed, but the way his fingers tapped nervously against the porcelain told a different story. I raised the trimmer, hovering an inch from his skin. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The low hum of the blades filled the silence. Then, finally, I pressed it against his chest, running a careful line downward. The vibration traveled up through my fingers, steady but strangely intimate. My hand brushed his skin, warm, solid, and I felt his body shift, just slightly, as if acknowledging the touch. I tried to focus on the task, keeping my strokes even, but my thoughts kept racing ahead of me. What am I doing? This is Max, my best friend, the guy I've known for years, the guy who jokes about everything, who always pretends he has it all figured out. And yet here I am, close enough to see the rise and fall of his chest, close enough to notice the way his breath caught for half a second when the trimmer touched his skin. I cleared my throat, needing something to break the tension. "So, you ever gonna buy a decent trimmer? Or are you planning on freeloading off me forever?" He chuckled, looking down at me with that grin. "Hey, don't complain. You get to practice your barber skills for free." "Yeah, that's what I always dreamed of," I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. "Cutting your chest hair instead of, I don't know, living a normal life." "Normal's overrated," he said, his tone light, but his eyes lingered on mine longer than they needed to. I dropped my gaze quickly, pretending to focus on his stomach now. The trimmer buzzed steadily as I worked, but inside I was anything but steady. Every second of closeness felt heavier than the last. "You okay?" Max asked suddenly. His voice was softer this time, less joking, more searching. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Why?" He shrugged again, though his shoulders were tense. "You're quiet. That's not like you." I forced a laugh, trying to shake it off. "Guess I'm concentrating. Don't want to mess up your reputation. Remember, right?" he said, though his smile didn't reach his eyes this time. I moved the trimmer lower, my knuckles brushing against the smooth skin near his ribs. He inhaled sharply, not dramatic, not enough to call attention to itself, but enough that I noticed. My hand hesitated for a second before I forced myself to keep going. The silence between us stretched thin, fragile. I filled it with the first thing that came to mind. "You know, if anyone walked in right now, they'd get the wrong idea." Max laughed, though it sounded nervous. "Yeah, but there's no one here, right?" The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. "No one here, just us." I swallowed hard, nodding. "Right?" For the first time since we started, I caught a glimpse of something in his expression. Not just amusement, not just comfort, but something that looked almost like trust. Vulnerable. As if letting me this close was more than just a favor, more than just a joke he'd agreed to. I looked away quickly, focusing on the sound of the trimmer, the neat lines forming on his chest. But my hands felt clumsy, my thoughts louder than ever. It should have been simple. Just a friend helping a friend. That's what I told myself over and over. But as I stood there, inches away, my hand moving slowly across his skin, I knew it wasn't simple at all. And deep down, I think Max knew it too. I told myself it was just hair, just trimming, nothing more. But when I pressed the buzzing trimmer against Max's chest again, I realized I was lying to myself. The first pass was easy. A neat line down the middle of his chest, smooth and simple. But then I had to adjust, leaning in closer, my hand steadying against his side as I worked. His skin was warm, warmer than I expected. I could feel the heat beneath my fingertips, the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "See," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Professional work. You should be paying me for this." Max chuckled, though his laugh came out softer this time. "Don't tempt me. I'm broke enough as it is." I smirked, running the trimmer across his shoulder and down his arm. My knuckles brushed against his skin again, this time lingering for just a fraction of a second too long. I told myself it was accidental, but I didn't pull away as quickly as I should have. He didn't say anything. He just shifted slightly, flexing his arm as if to give me more room. I moved down to his other arm, focusing on the steady hum of the blades. The bathroom was quiet except for that sound, and the faint rhythm of his breathing, which I noticed had started to deepen. Every once in a while, our eyes would meet in the mirror, and I'd look away quickly, pretending to be focused on the task. When I finished his arms, I hesitated before lowering the trimmer toward his stomach. He glanced down, raising his eyebrows. "You scared you're gonna mess up? Just making sure you don't flinch?" I said, though my throat felt dry. "Man, I'm fine," he replied, leaning back a little against the counter. "Do your thing." So I did. I pressed the trimmer lightly against the line of his stomach, moving downward in careful strokes. My hand brushed across his abs, steadying myself, and again that heat spread through me. The faint scent of his cologne mixed with the sharper note of soap, and for a second, the world felt very small. Just him, me, and the sound of my pulse in my ears. I tried to focus on breathing evenly, but my chest felt tight. Every touch felt magnified, every accidental graze carrying more weight than it should. At one point, as I adjusted the angle of the trimmer, the back of my hand grazed lower, closer to the waistband of his shorts than I intended. I froze for half a second, but before I could move, I felt him stiffen under my touch. Not pulling away, not stopping me, just stiffening. The air shifted in that moment. His body tensed, his breath caught, and in the mirror, I saw his eyes flick down, then back up again. I swallowed hard, pulling the trimmer back up toward safer ground. "Sorry. My bad." Max didn't answer right away. His chest rose and fell in a sharper rhythm, and for the first time he didn't laugh it off. He just stood there, silent, as if waiting for something. Finally, he muttered, "It's fine." His voice was lower than before, almost rough. I nodded quickly, pretending to focus on the trimmer again. But I couldn't ignore the change. His breathing was heavier now, slower but deeper, like every touch had started to mean something it hadn't a few minutes ago. I worked carefully, slower than before, tracing neat lines across his stomach. My hands steadied against his skin again, and this time, when my fingers lingered, I didn't move them away right away. He didn't move either. The silence between us was deafening. My head was spinning with thoughts I couldn't admit, questions I didn't dare ask. What did it mean that he hadn't stopped me? What did it mean that his body had reacted the way it did? I risked a glance up at his face. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the mirror, but not on his reflection. On me. I quickly looked away, my hand trembling slightly as I guided the trimmer back up to his chest. The warmth of his body seemed to radiate through me, setting every nerve on edge. Almost done, I murmured, though my voice barely carried. Take your time, Max replied softly. The words hit me harder than I expected. Take your time. Not hurry up. Not let's get this over with. Take your time. I swallowed again, my throat dry, and kept working. Every touch felt deliberate now, even when I told myself it wasn't. My fingers brushed his skin as though testing boundaries I wasn't sure I was allowed to cross. And each time, he let me. By the time I finished, the trimmer buzzed in my hand like a reminder of reality. I switched it off, and the silence that followed was thick. Too thick. Max shifted slightly, crossing his arms over his chest. He looked at me, not joking this time, not grinning, just looking. His breathing was steady but heavier than before, as though he just finished a workout. I set the trimmer down on the counter, forcing a laugh to break the tension. There. Good as new. Your reputation is safe. He didn't laugh. He just tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly, like he was trying to read me. You okay? Yeah, I said quickly. Why wouldn't I be? He shrugged, but the movement was tight. You just seemed different. I opened my mouth to reply, but nothing came out. Because he was right. Something was different. And no matter how hard I tried to convince myself otherwise, I couldn't shake the feeling that Max knew it too. For a moment I thought about stopping, just turning off the trimmer, handing it back, and laughing like the whole thing had been one big joke. That would have been the easy way out, the safe way. But when I glanced up, I saw Max watching me in the mirror. His expression wasn't mocking. It wasn't even curious in the way it usually was when he was about to make fun of me. He just looked serious, focused, like he was waiting to see what I would do next. My chest tightened. I swallowed, forcing myself to look back down at the job in front of me. It's just hair, I told myself again. Just shaving. Don't make this weird. And yet, my hands felt clumsy. My breaths came too fast. I could feel the weight of every second stretching out longer than it should have. You okay there, surgeon? Max asked finally, his tone laced with teasing, though his voice was softer than usual. Yeah, I muttered. Why? He smirked faintly, raising one brow. You're acting like it's a big deal. Relax. It's just me. Just me. The words echoed louder than I expected. For years, Max had been just my friend. The guy who cracked jokes too loudly, who borrowed my stuff without asking, who always had my back when I needed him. But in that moment, he wasn't just anything. He was standing in front of me, bare-chested, close enough for me to smell the soap on his skin, close enough for me to hear the shift in his breathing. I forced a laugh, hoping it would hide the nerves in my voice. Sorry. Guess I don't want to ruin your modeling career. Max chuckled, shaking his head, but he didn't move away. If anything, he leaned slightly against the counter, like he was giving me permission to keep going. So I did. The trimmer buzzed back to life in my hand, and I guided it lower, tracing careful lines across the edges of his stomach. My fingers steadied against him, brushing his skin, lingering a moment too long before moving away. I told myself it was an accident. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But when I adjusted again, shifting my angle, the back of my hand slid against him, lower this time. Not too much. Not blatant. Just enough that the touch couldn't be explained away so easily. Max stiffened again, just as he had before. But instead of pulling back, he drew in a slow, uneven breath. His shoulders rose, then fell, and I noticed the subtle way his posture shifted, like he was caught between staying still and stepping closer. My own heartbeat thudded so hard I thought it might echo in the room. I pretended to focus on the trimmer, brushing the blades in smooth lines, but my mind was spinning. Did I just cross a line? Did he notice? Of course he noticed. I'd felt it, the way his body reacted, the way the silence thickened instantly around us. I cleared my throat, breaking the quiet. Almost done, I said, though my voice cracked slightly. Take your time, he murmured, repeating the same words he'd said before. This time they sounded heavier, intentional. I hesitated, trimmer hovering just above his skin. My hand trembled slightly, and I wasn't sure if it was from guilt or desire, or both. I thought about all the years we'd spent as friends, all the nights laughing until sunrise, all the stupid adventures we'd had. Was I really about to risk all of that for a touch I couldn't take back? But when I glanced up again, Max wasn't looking at the mirror anymore. He was looking directly at me. His eyes locked on mine, steady but unreadable. The silence between us buzzed louder than the trimmer. I forced myself to look away, guiding the blades back across his skin. My hand slipped again, brushing close, lingering. This time, I didn't even bother to move away quickly. Max's breath hitched, quiet but noticeable. His fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the counter. Neither of us spoke. The room was too still, too charged. The trimmer moved lower, steady in my grip, but my mind wasn't on it anymore. It was on the heat of his skin beneath my hand. The way his body responded, not with resistance but with something else. Something unspoken, something new. I tried to mask it with a joke. "You're lucky I'm not billing by the hour. You'd be broke." He smirked faintly, though his breathing was still heavy. "Guess I'll owe you one." The way he said it, low, almost rough, made my chest tighten again. I nodded quickly, pretending not to notice, pretending this was all still casual. But deep down, I knew I'd crossed a line. Maybe we both had. The trimmer hummed in my hand, the only sound between us, but it couldn't drown out the truth anymore. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. I'd just run the trimmer across his stomach when Max suddenly shifted. It wasn't much, just a small step back, enough to put a sliver of air between us. But it felt like a jolt. My hand froze mid-air. I looked up, expecting him to laugh it off, maybe shove me on the shoulder and tell me to stop being weird. But instead, his eyes locked on mine in the mirror. For the first time since we'd started, there was no grin, no smirk, no shield of humor. Just a searching look that pinned me where I stood. My stomach dropped. This is it, I thought. He's figured it out. He knows I've crossed the line. But then, to my complete shock, Max's lips curved into the smallest, most nervous smile I'd ever seen on him. His voice was low, unsteady in a way I'd never heard before. "Are you?" He hesitated, clearing his throat. "Doing this on purpose?" The trimmer in my hand buzzed loudly in the silence, mocking me. My pulse slammed against my ears. Every excuse I could think of tangled together and dissolved before I could say a single one. I swallowed hard. I didn't mean to, I swear. I wasn't trying to. I trailed off, my voice cracking. Max tilted his head slightly, his gaze still locked on me. His nervous smile lingered, but there was no anger in it, no accusation, just curiosity, and maybe something else. "You sure about that?" he asked, his tone gentle, not teasing this time. My chest tightened. "I didn't mean to cross a boundary," I said quickly, words tumbling out before I could stop them. "If I did, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened." The silence that followed stretched thin, like a wire pulled too tight. I wanted to disappear, to vanish into the floor and never face him again. Then Max exhaled slowly, the corners of his mouth twitching as though he was about to laugh but couldn't quite bring himself to. His eyes softened. "Don't be sorry," he said. I blinked. "What?" "I don't want you to stop." The words hit me like a punch. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. But the look in his eyes was steady now. Still nervous, but certain enough that I knew I wasn't imagining it. My mouth went dry. "You don't." He shook his head, running a hand through his hair in that restless way he always did when he was trying to cover up nerves. "No. Yeah, I noticed. And at first I thought, I don't know what I thought, but it doesn't bother me." He paused, his throat working as he swallowed. "It's kinda the opposite." My heart hammered so loud I was sure he could hear it. "The opposite?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. Max gave a quick, nervous laugh. "You're not the only one who's been feeling something. I just never knew what to do about it." I felt my knees weaken. Everything inside me wanted to argue, to say this couldn't be real, that I must have misunderstood. But the way he was looking at me told me otherwise. Suddenly the trimmer in my hand felt ridiculous, like a prop from a play that had gone completely off script. I set it down slowly on the counter, my fingers trembling. "This isn't about shaving anymore," I said quietly, almost to myself. Max gave a small nod. "No, I don't think it ever really was." The air between us grew heavier, but not with guilt anymore. With something deeper, something fragile but undeniable. I was scared I'd ruined everything, I admitted, my words spilling out before I could stop them. "That you'd hate me for." He cut me off, his voice soft but firm. "I don't hate you." I couldn't. I stared at him, every part of me conflicted. For years, Max had been my safe place, my best friend. And now, standing shirtless in my bathroom with the air thick between us, he was suddenly something else entirely. Inside, a war raged. This isn't what friends do. This could ruin everything. But what if it doesn't? What if this is what's been waiting for us all along? Max shifted slightly closer, not enough to touch, but enough that the warmth of his body reached me again. His breathing was still uneven, but there was a steadiness in his eyes now, a quiet decision. "Look," he said, his voice low. "If you don't want this, tell me. We can laugh it off, pretend it never happened. I'll drop it. No questions asked." The offer hung between us like a lifeline, but I couldn't take it. Not when every fiber of me screamed that this moment was real, that the line we'd crossed had only revealed something true that had always been there. "I don't want to pretend," I whispered. For the first time all evening, Max's smile wasn't nervous. It was soft, honest. "Good," he said simply. And just like that, I knew nothing about our friendship would ever be the same again. I couldn't stop staring at him. My mind was a mess, words tangled up in my throat, but my heart was screaming with one thought. I thought he was straight. I thought this was just a joke. For years, I trained myself not to look too closely, not to imagine anything beyond the safe lines of our friendship. He was my best friend, the one who'd shared late-night pizza with me on exam weeks, the one who always had a dumb comeback when I was down, the one I could count on to answer the phone at 2 in the morning. He was the last person I ever thought I'd be standing this close to, in a moment that felt nothing like the friendship we'd always known. Max ran a hand through his hair, looking everywhere but at me for a second before his eyes found mine again. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it, a nervous tremor slipping through. "I don't know what's happening right now," he admitted. "I never thought about it before. Not like this." He paused, shaking his head with a breathless laugh. "But I feel something, and I don't want to pretend I don't." My chest ached at his honesty. Hearing him say it out loud, the confusion, the rawness, made it harder to keep hiding my own. I swallowed hard. "You're not the only one who's confused." For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy but not empty. His gaze didn't waver, and mine couldn't look away. He leaned back against the counter, exhaling like the weight of the world was pressing down on him. "It's crazy," he said softly. "I've been your friend forever. I never even thought about crossing that line. But now—" He stopped himself, clenching his jaw. "Now I don't know what I'd do if you told me this was a mistake." The words hit me deep. My heart raced, not from fear anymore, but from recognition, because I felt the same. "I don't want to lose you," I said. The admission burned on my tongue, but it was the truth I couldn't bury. "That's what I'm scared of most. Not this, not the moment, just losing us." Max nodded slowly, his eyes softening. "Same." We stood there, barely a breath apart, both of us balancing on a knife's edge between something new and the safety of what we'd always known. The hum of the trimmer on the counter had gone silent, but the sound of his breathing filled the room. Steady, nervous, real. I felt my hand twitch at my side, aching to reach for him, but I froze. What if he pulled away? What if the air between us collapsed into something awkward, something broken? "I don't know what this means," Max admitted again, his voice raw. "I'm not saying I've figured it out, or that I suddenly know who I am, but when you touched me, it didn't feel wrong. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like—" He trailed off, eyes flicking away before landing back on mine. "Like something I don't want to end." His vulnerability cracked something inside me. For so long, I'd assumed I was the only one carrying unspoken tension, the only one who noticed the closeness, the accidental brushes that lingered too long. To hear him put words to feelings I thought were impossible, it was like stepping into a new world I wasn't sure how to navigate. I let out a shaky laugh, though it was more from nerves than humor. Do you have any idea how confusing it is to hear you say that? After all the years I convinced myself you'd never. Never what? He pressed gently. Never feel the same, I whispered. The silence that followed was louder than anything. My throat tightened, and my eyes stung as if the truth had cost me more than I expected. But Max didn't flinch. He didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly, as if my confession had been something he already knew deep down. He took a small step closer, not enough to close the gap completely, but enough that the air between us grew warmer. His voice dropped even lower. So what do we do now? The question lingered in the room, sharp and heavy, and for the first time, I realized the decision wasn't just his. It was mine. I looked at him, really looked at him. His nervous smile, his clenched jaw, the way his hands fidgeted at his sides as though he was barely holding himself together. He wasn't sure of himself, wasn't even sure of what this meant. But he was standing here anyway, with me. Inside, two voices battled. One screamed at me to step back, to protect what we already had, to avoid the risk of ruining the most important friendship of my life. The other whispered louder, "This isn't just about friendship anymore. This is real. This is him." My pulse hammered as I tried to catch my breath. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "I don't know what happens if we do this. But I know I can't pretend I don't feel it either." Max's eyes locked on mine, steady despite the storm in them. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. The room felt suspended, like time had paused just for us. No laughter, no distractions, no jokes to cover the truth. Just me and him caught between fear and possibility. And in that fragile, terrifying moment, I knew I had to choose. Step back into safety, or lean into a truth that could change everything. The choice had been gnawing at me all night, but as Max stood there waiting, the silence heavy between us, I knew I couldn't keep hiding. My chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. "Max," I said quietly, "I have to be honest. I've felt something for a while, longer than I want to admit." His eyebrows lifted, surprise flickering across his face before softening into something gentler. "You have." I nodded, my throat tight. I thought I was crazy for it. I told myself it was just me reading too much into things. I never wanted to risk losing what we had. So I stayed quiet. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, processing. My heart pounded, and I braced for the possibility that I'd said too much, that I'd pushed too far. But then he let out a breathy laugh. Not mocking, not dismissive, just nervous. "Funny thing is," he said, running a hand across the back of his neck, "I've thought about it too. Not all the time, but little moments, stuff I brushed off. I never dared to let it stay in my head for long. Something in me loosened. Relief, hope, maybe both. Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, my voice small. "Because I didn't want to mess this up either," he admitted. His eyes flicked away for a moment before coming back to mine. "You're the person I trust most." The idea of ruining that scared me more than anything. The weight of his words sank deep. The truth was out now, bare and unpolished, and for the first time in years we weren't pretending anymore. I stepped a little closer, my hand twitching at my side before I finally let it bridge the gap. Slowly, cautiously, I reached for his hand. His fingers hesitated, just for a heartbeat, before curling around mine. The touch was small, almost nothing, but it felt monumental. His palm was warm, steady, and for the first time that night, I let myself breathe. We stood like that for a while, hands locked, the silence not awkward but full of meaning. Max gave a soft chuckle. "We're really doing this, huh?" "Yeah," I whispered. "I think we are." He shifted closer, his bare shoulder brushing against mine, and I felt the heat radiating from him. The closeness wasn't accidental this time. It was deliberate, chosen. "Come here," he said quietly, tugging me a little closer until we were standing chest to chest. The trimmer still sat forgotten on the counter, but it might as well have belonged to another world. I leaned in, my forehead resting gently against his. The contact was simple, soft, but it sent shivers down my spine. His breath fanned across my skin, warm and steady, and for the first time all night, the tension between us eased into something calmer. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. The moment was enough. "I can't believe this is happening," Max murmured, his voice low. "Me neither," I admitted. "But I don't want it to stop." He squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in a slow rhythm. "Then it doesn't have to." We stayed like that, leaning against each other, our foreheads touching, our breaths sinking. The world outside the bathroom walls faded away. There were no labels, no explanations, no grand declarations. Just two people finally admitting what had been buried for too long. Eventually, Max let out a soft sigh and gave a tired laugh. "We're not going to figure all this out tonight." "No," I agreed, smiling faintly. "But we don't have to." We drifted out of the bathroom and into the dimly lit living room, still holding hands. The couch welcomed us like it had 100 times before, but tonight felt different. We sat close, shoulders pressed together, the warmth of his shirtless frame grounding me in the reality of the moment. He shifted slightly, leaning back until his head rested on the cushion. Without overthinking it, I followed, letting myself relax beside him. Before long, his arms slipped around me, pulling me against his side. I didn't resist. My head found its place against his shoulder, and he gave a small hum of approval, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The minutes ticked by, the silence no longer sharp but comfortable. His hand rested lightly on my arm, steady and protective. My eyes grew heavy, but I fought to stay awake, not wanting the night to end. Max's voice came softly, almost a whisper. "You realize this is the first time the lines are gone, right?" "Yeah," I whispered back. "And I'm okay with that." He gave my arm a gentle squeeze, and that was the last thing I felt before sleep finally pulled me under. For the first time, we weren't separated by boundaries. For the first time, we were something more. When morning light slipped through the blinds, I woke to the steady rhythm of Max's breathing beside me. For a split second, I thought it was one of those sleepovers we'd had so many times before. Falling asleep on the couch after a movie marathon or crashing at each other's places after a long night out. But then I felt the weight of his arm draped over me, the warmth of his bare skin against mine, and the memory of everything that had happened the night before came rushing back. It was real. I stayed still, eyes half closed, just listening. His breathing was calm, steady, safe. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt that same calm inside me. No more questions spinning out of control, no more pretending. Just the quiet truth that something had shifted between us, and there was no going back. I thought about how it all started, how ridiculous it seemed that a broken trimmer and a silly offer had led us here. I could still picture him walking into my apartment, holding that useless thing like it was a joke he couldn't wait to make fun of. Neither of us had any idea where that moment would take us. Life is strange that way. The smallest choices, the accidents we barely think about, can change everything. Max stirred slightly, his arm tightening around me as if his body didn't want to let go, even in sleep. I smiled faintly, my chest warming at the thought. For so long, I'd convinced myself he could never feel the same. He was the one I laughed with, the one I leaned on, but never the one I let myself imagine in the quiet hours. Last night had shattered that illusion in the best possible way. We hadn't defined it. We hadn't used any labels, hadn't made any promises. And maybe we weren't ready to. But the way he held my hand, the way his forehead pressed against mine, the way neither of us had pulled away, that was real. That was enough. I shifted slightly, careful not to wake him, and let myself take in the details. His hair was messy, sticking up at odd angles. His jaw was rough with stubble, the same jaw I'd been shaving just hours before. His lips parted slightly in sleep, soft and unguarded. For years, he'd been my best friend. And now he was something more. The weight of that realization settled deep in my chest, heavy but comforting. I thought about what came next, about the questions we'd have to face, the conversations we couldn't avoid forever. What did this mean for us? For our friendship? For the future? But then I reminded myself of what he'd said last night. We don't have to figure it all out right now. And he was right. For once, I didn't need the answers. It was enough to know we were both stepping into this together, even if we were still unsure of the ground beneath our feet. Eventually, Max stirred again, his eyes blinking open. For a moment he looked confused. Then he saw me and gave a sleepy smile. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I echoed softly. We stayed like that, looking at each other, smiling without saying much. It was simple, unpolished, and somehow perfect. He squeezed my arm gently. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, better than okay." His smile widened just a little. "Good." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of everything we didn't need to put into words yet. As the morning light grew brighter, I knew life wouldn't be the same. Our friendship had changed. It had grown into something deeper, something we hadn't planned for, something we couldn't have predicted. And yet, it felt right. Later, when we finally pulled ourselves off the couch and started the day, nothing felt normal anymore. But that wasn't a bad thing. We laughed as we made breakfast. We argued about who burned the toast, and every glance, every brush of a hand, carried new meaning. It wasn't about labels. It wasn't about rushing into declarations. It was about admitting that we'd stepped into something real, something fragile and precious, and we were willing to see where it went. Looking back on it now, I can't help but laugh at the absurdity of it. Who would have thought a broken trimmer could change everything? Who would have guessed that a silly favor between friends would be the spark that lit something neither of us could ignore? Sometimes, love doesn't arrive in grand gestures or sweeping moments. Sometimes it sneaks in through the cracks of ordinary life, through laughter, through accidents, through the smallest of favors. I used to think our story would always be one of friendship, unshakable and familiar. But now, as I stand at the beginning of something new with him, I realize friendship was just the foundation. The rest was waiting all along. And sometimes, love begins with the most unexpected, awkward accidents. What about you? Would you risk a friendship for love if the signs were there? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take.